When I was in elementary school, I always drew my trees like this, with a rectangular base and the circles to represent the leaves on top. However, once I reached 6th grade and took art in the years following, I realized that my trees were not really trees. They do not capture the branching nature of trees, nor the inner life that trees possess. I especially noticed this when I took AP Art last year, with a concentration on landscapes. As I was painting on landscapes, I realized how important the trees were to the art composition. It did not matter whether the tree was in the foreground, the background, or the center of the piece. The tree is vital in bringing the setting which it is placed to life. That is why I realized it was very important to learn how to draw a tree realistically. Through that year-long process, I noticed 3 key basic areas you need to focus on when trying to illustrate a realistic tree. The first is the tree structure, the second is the light source, and the third is the color palette. So let's start off with the tree structure. When drawing a tree structure, you should always use a reference photo. The reference photo is very important so that you could see how each of the branches are placed within the tree. Even a professional artist such as Michael James Smith uses reference photos when illustrating trees. As you can see on the far right, he's using a reference photo as he's illustrating his tree. In this episode 31, How to Paint Foreground Trees. Now, let's sketch the tree. As you can see on the right is the tree sketch that I made, and on the left is the reference photo. So let's focus on this tree sketch. As you can notice, at the base of the tree is the thickest, and as it goes up to the top, the branches become thinner and thinner. But also notice how I did not try to illustrate every single branch of the tree. As you can see, I only did the main parts of the tree, in which can be shown, because leaves that when added to the tree will cover the majority of the branches. All you need to do is have enough branches to show where the leaves will be placed, as indicated by the small branches up top, as well as have the main branches so that when there's gaps in the trees it can be shown. So what I mean by leaves will cover most of the branches, as you can see Michael James Smith number 31, on his right side, you can see that the majority of the branches were covered up by the tree leaves. You cannot see any of those branches, but it is still important, as seen in his number 133, Painting a Landscape, in which the branches are still seen on the trees on the top left-hand corner. Now, once you have drawn the tree structure, the next important thing to focus on is the light source. The light source is very important because it shows you where of the tree you need to highlight. So as you can see from the reference photo we are using, the light source is at the top right-hand corner of this photo, right as shown in the picture. So, without the light source, it does not show the 3D nature of the tree. It becomes flat, like a comic, as a tree might be used as a comic as seen in the middle tree, or on the far right, you can see maybe a coloring book. However, it does not show the 3D nature of the tree, as well as if you were to apply a light source. So, let's add that to the sketch. So with the light source, we need to first define where the light source will be. For this demonstration, I'll be copying the same light source as seen in the reference photo at the top right. So let's apply that. So as you can see, the tree is popping out of the picture because of the light source, because it shows the 3D nature of the tree with the areas closer to the light source highlighted, or the areas farther back in shadow. So let's look closer at that. As you can see, you should always showcase where the shadows will be on the branches of the tree and how it blocks the light. As you can see over here and there, this shows the shadows of branches overlapping the other branches. That's why it's important to know where the light source will be and to highlight the different areas of the tree. The next thing, once you've selected this tree structure and defined it, then discover where we want to put the light source and all the highlights of the tree. Next thing important to note is the color palette. As you can see here on the far right is 3 color splotches that I've chosen based on the reference photo. Most artists use colors that are really close to that of the reference picture so that it makes it easier to realistically illustrate the tree. However, when you're choosing those colors, you usually want to focus on 3 colors, the 3 main colors: a dark, a medium, and a light. As you can see here, there's a dark, medium, and light from right to left. So for this demonstration, I'll be choosing the first splotch because I like the orange color of it as it shows the more summer to fall time period that we are currently in. So light sources effect. You always need to consider the light sources effect on the tree when applying the color palette. For the lighter areas of the tree, you should always focus on the lighter parts of your color, as well as the darker parts of the tree for the darker areas. So for the application, when you're applying the color palette to your tree, you usually want to do blocking first, before adding all the nitty-gritty details. Blocking is when you indicate the areas of the tree that have the three main colors that are predominant. As you can see on a closer look with the reference photo, the orange parts of the tree are near the top and along the edges of the leaves, while the leaves themselves are more predominantly green. And as you can show that the trunk as well, the shadowed areas will have the darker parts of the color splotch, while the other areas will have medium to light. So these are how you have blocking of the tree, and it helps you fully develop for the setup to the more advanced parts of illustrating a tree and showcasing where the leaves are and fully defining it in your color, in your art piece. So once you have these three basics, you can then move on to the final stages of your piece, where you add in all the more advanced details and techniques with your tools and brushes that are not going to be discussed in this demonstration. But in reality, it's not so difficult to improve how you illustrate a tree. You just need to pay attention to the three key basic steps: the tree structure, the light source, and the color palette. These three things allow you to better capture the blanching nature of the trees, as well as the inner vitality that it possesses. With this info, evolve your elementary tree like I did. Make your artistic setting come to life. Any questions?